Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for joining me again. So I'm Lar from Complete Test Success. For those of you who don't know me, I've been an IELTS examiner in writing and speaking. I've been teaching IELTS since 2010, so lots of experience. But today we're doing something a little bit different. We're going to focus on grammar today, and I've never done this before. So this live stream could be an absolute disaster. I really don't know. So the idea was that I would just let you ask me questions you have about grammar to see if I can help you overcome any problems you're having or any confusion that you have with grammar. Now, it just depends on what people bring to me. You know, if there are lots of questions, you know, and I'm able to help you, then in the future, I will do these grammar support live streams again. But, you know, if I don't get any questions, or if this format is a difficult way to help you with your grammar, then I just won't do it. I'll just stick with focusing on the IELTS test, as I have done in all my live streams up until this point. So yeah, that's basically what we're going to do. You ask me any grammar questions you have. Tell me what struggles you're having with grammar. Maybe it could be like a sentence you don't understand why it's right, or you don't know why it's wrong. It could be an area of grammar that you're struggling to improve and you don't understand the rules or whatever it would be. So yeah, that's basically what we're going to do today. I'm going to try and help you with grammar, and maybe it doesn't work. And if it doesn't, well, not really much I can say beyond let's not do this again. So let's see what happens. Hi, Vivek. Good to see you here from Nepal. Lovely country, lovely people. Hi, Sapreet. Doing good, thanks. Hi, Arthur. Welcome to the lesson from Ghana. Very nice. Good to have you here. Okay, so at the moment, that's basically it. Does anyone have questions about grammar? Does anyone have any areas of grammar that they need help with? Just let me know, and I'll give you the support I can. Hey, Stephen. Welcome to the lesson. Stephen, I've seen that you sent me essays already. It'll be a little bit later today when I correct those for you. Stephen, for those of you who obviously everybody, Stephen's on my writing course, and Stephen sent me some essays. So Stephen, it'll be later. It'll be a little bit later today. After this, I have to collect my daughter and have dinner, and then after that, I'll get those essays back to you. So again, welcome, Stephen. From Uzbekistan, Koramboy, welcome. Ramatov, hello to you. Modal verb, how to use. Okay. So what area are you struggling with when it comes to modal verbs, Vivek? So like different modal verbs have different meanings, and then depending on the context, you know, the context will change the meaning of the modal as well. If we were to take would as an example, so let's say if we focus on would, there are a few different ways that we use would. So let me just share this, and I'll try and explain it by writing it up here. So the first way that we use would is to talk about events in the past. But it's used with used to. So when we say used to, we're talking about a habit. We're talking about a habit in the past. So something that you used to do in the past is something that you did often in the past, but you don't do anymore. Okay. So for example, if I said, I used to play basketball when I was in school, what that also means, not only telling you about the situation when I was in school, it's also telling you about the situation now, which means now I'm not. Now I don't play basketball anymore. So that's how used to is used. So something like this. I used to play basketball. I was in school. But then if I want to give you more information about that, I don't use used to anymore. Now I start to use would. So when we introduce the topic that first time, we use used to. After that, we use would. So let's say something like this. I would get up early every day, and I would meet my friends, and let me get this on screen again. Now, meet my friends in the yard. Then we would play together until the bell rang. Okay, so that's the first use of would, where I introduce the topic using used to, and then every other time I don't use used to anymore. From now on, it's would, would, would. So I'm describing what happened regularly in the past, but doesn't happen anymore. Okay, so that is the first use of would. Another use of would then is when we're trying to be polite. Okay, so the first one is when we use it with used to. The other one's when we're trying to be polite. So if I say to you, let's say we're eating dinner together, I say, give me the salt. That's pretty rude. That's pretty impolite. So if I just say to you, give me the salt, you're going to think that I'm a rude person. So we can also use the word would in this situation to make it sound more polite. So would you mind giving me the salt? So here we're using would to make ourselves sound more polite. So that's another common usage of would. And then the other one that kind of pops to mind, that comes to mind, is when we're using second conditional. The other one is when we're using second conditional. So, so if I had more free time, I would learn to play the guitar. Okay, now I don't have more free time, so I'm not talking about something that's real. This is me imagining. So we're imagining a situation that's not real. So in my imagination, I'm imagining if I had more free time, which I don't, and I don't expect to have any more free time anytime soon. So this is why it's imaginary. If it was something that we thought might be a real situation, like, you know, maybe next week I'm going to quit my job and I will have more free time. So when I have more free time, I will learn to play the guitar. But in this situation, it's second conditional. So I'm talking about an imaginary situation. So here I'm using would to show that it's imaginary, to help us distance it, to help us distance what I'm saying from reality. I'm using would, and that shows that it is an imaginary situation. So it depends. So you asked me how to use modal verbs. And again, like that's just one modal verb, would. And we have, you know, 3 different uses. There might even be other uses that I'm not thinking of right now, but those are the 3 that come to my mind more quickly. But then we have all the other ones like, you know, could, about ability, should, about suggestions. So the different ones have different meanings as well. So yeah, if you want to ask me other questions, if maybe you weren't asking about would and you have a more specific question that you want to ask, by all means, go ahead. But from your initial question about modal verbs, that's the information that kind of comes to my mind to begin with. English with Bably Dylan 1111. Hi, Bably. Welcome. Ken Clark, long time. Hope you're well. I have a question. How do you recommend we go about practicing for using different sentence structures? My problem is that when thinking in English, I naturally lapse back to simpler structures. So in speaking, we tend not to use very complex structures in the way we would in writing, because when we're writing, there's more time to process what we want to say and to structure it in a more organized way. But when we're speaking, you wouldn't find the same range of structures as you would in writing. So that's the first thing. Like, you know, people speaking don't sound like written text. So you know, that's one thing to be aware of, is if you are trying to use the same range of structures as you would in your writing, that might not be the correct thing to do. And then if you're looking to improve your range of structures, you know, it's like that whole process. When you're trying to improve your grammar, you're starting with, you know, studying the grammar, making sure you understand the rules. So it's always begin with the rules. Be it like, you know, the Grammarly website, I always recommend, a great website. The Grammarly blog, it's called. That will give you a nice oversight. The grammar section of the Cambridge Dictionary is another good one. There's plenty of good websites out there. But start with that. Start with the rules. And then you need to do lots and lots of reading. So getting to understand the grammar on a deeper level by reading lots of texts, it doesn't have to be newspapers. It doesn't have to be something that you find boring. It doesn't have to be something academic. You can just read normal books. You know, if you enjoy reading thrillers, or if you enjoy reading, you know, crime novels or whatever, it doesn't have to be something academic, because you'll find all those structures being used quite naturally in written English. So what you want to do is read something and pay attention to the way the structures are being used there. So that might mean you need to stop, go back, like research that particular structure because you don't understand how it's constructed, or you don't understand what the meaning is. So, you know, you might need to stop while you're reading and go back and do a bit more research and see how it's used, make sure you understand it. But from doing lots of reading and really focusing on the structures, you'll get more competent. You'll understand them more deeply. From there, you move on to writing. So you would never go from reading to speaking. Go from reading to writing. Make sure that you're able to do it when you're writing. Improve your ability to, you know, think of what to say more quickly by practicing it in your writing. And then when you finally get to introduce it to your speaking, you need to slow down. You need to speak slowly. So you're not going to be able to do it by just, you know, speaking at the same pace that you normally do. You want to slow down so that you have time to think of it. You want to slow down so that you're able to contemplate, you know, what structure you want to use, what structure is suitable, what are the, you know, the components of the structure. So speaking slowly and allowing yourself enough time to think about what you're doing, so you can introduce that grammar slowly but surely into your speaking. When you are doing this, you know, like, you're not going to do it when you're at work speaking English to other people, because nobody wants to listen to you speak slowly. So you'll probably need to do this by yourself at home. Practice speaking slowly by yourself at home. Allow yourself to think about the grammar and introduce it into your own speaking. And then once you get more comfortable and more competent, you'll naturally start to speak faster again. And at that point, you know, you'll have achieved what you wanted. So that's what I'd recommend for you with that. Hi, Lewis. Welcome to the lesson. Passive voice. Yeah, no problem. We can look at passive voice. Let me go back to my notes here. Okay. So passive voice is we have two things, passive voice and active voice. Okay. Now, what we would do is, let's say something like this. I ate my daughter's sweets. This is something that happens more often than I would like to admit. Okay. And then a passive version would be my daughter's sweets were eaten by me. Okay. Might be easier if I use my name. So Lar ate his daughter's sweets. It'll be easier to explain it this way. So my daughter's this is a terrible example. Give me a moment. because we'd never say John's daughter sweets were eaten by John or Lara's daughter sweets were eaten by Lara. So it's just a bad example. Okay, so let's say okay, I'll get there. Bear with me. I'm getting there. Okay, so first of all, you want to think about it from the perspective of the parts of a sentence. Subject plus verb plus object, like that. Okay, now, where is the verb in the sentence? Well, here the verb is stole, and here the verb is was stolen. Now, when we're looking at an active structure, who stole the car? It was a local man. So who did the stealing? It was this person who did the stealing. So when it's an active voice, the person who did whatever action is in the verb is at the start of the sentence. But with a passive voice, it's over here, a local man. So that's what we're doing. We're taking whoever did the thing and putting them at the end of the sentence. So instead of the person who did the thing being the subject, as would be the normal situation, we take the person who did the thing and turn that into the object. So it becomes by a local man instead of a local man. So the subject becomes the object and the object becomes the subject. But then why are we doing that? Well, the reason that we're doing this is because I would be telling you a story about me and my car, right? So it could be the case that I'm telling you a story about my car. So I'm going to put my car at the front of the sentence because that's the thing that I'm talking about. I want us to focus on the thing I'm talking about rather than focusing on the thing I'm not talking about, being a local man. So that would be the first reason, would be I'm telling you a story about my car, and therefore I use passive voice so that my car can be the focus and the subject of the sentence. Another possible reason would be I don't know who stole it. It could be the case that we haven't found out yet. So, I walked out of the shop, my car was gone. So I don't know who stole it. All I know is that it was stolen. So it could be the case that I don't have that information. I don't know who did it. So I wouldn't even say that. Instead of saying my car was stolen by a local man, it would just be that my car was stolen. And who did it, I don't know. So either who did it is information we don't have, or who did it is information that's not important to the story I'm telling. And that's why we're using passive voice. And then what happens with the grammar? So what we talked about already is that the subject becomes the object and the object becomes the subject. Now, what happens to the grammar is we kind of move back one. So whatever tense you were using here, stole, so that's past simple, right? So that's past simple. So the verb be in this sentence is the same, was. So the past simple version of the verb be goes here, and then stole moves back to past perfect and becomes the past. My apologies. The passive. What's that called? The past participle. So basically, if the first sentence was in present simple, this would become past simple. If this one is past simple, this becomes past the past participle. So it kind of takes one step back. So the verb be keeps the same tense, and the other verb moves back in time one by one. So I think that is kind of the majority of how the passive structure works. But, you know, maybe I haven't given you all the information you were looking for. Maybe I've told you all the stuff that you already know, and the information that you're looking for wasn't included. And if that's the case, just, you know, tell me in the comments, and I'll try and include more information, or the specific information you need. But yeah, from the outset, those are the main parts of passive structures: how it's formed, swapping the subject and the object, changing the verb, and why we use it, because we want to focus on what would normally be the object, or we don't know who did the thing, or who did the thing isn't important. Ken Clark, for expressing complex ideas, they do the job of conveying the general idea, but sometimes feel a bit lengthy and amateurish. I mean, it depends what your goal is. Like, are you trying to impress people? And if you listen to people speaking normally, like when you hear me speaking now, am I using any of these structures that you're hoping to implement into your speaking? What I wonder is, because I know your English is already very good, like what I'm wondering is, are you trying to push yourself kind of beyond what's natural? So just pay attention to the way people speak. And, you know, if you're trying to introduce the structures that would typically be part of writing, then if you're trying to use the structures that would typically be part of writing, then don't try to speak in that way. Okay, so Quorum Boy, how many grammatical ranges need to be included to get a higher score in writing task 2 and task 1? Well, the main thing you would do is avoid using basic sentence structures. So if you have a sentence structure, it's like subject plus verb plus object, and just that, and that's the complete sentence, that's not going to help you get a higher score. So you would be expected to use no simple basic sentence structures like that throughout your entire task 1 and task 2. The range isn't so much about how many structures you use, because the examiner will just be looking at it more holistically, and they don't have a number. So they're not going like, there's one structure, there's two structures, there's three structures. But it's more to do with, are you using a range? Are you using them appropriately? And, you know, you might be able to write one form, you know, you might have one complex structure that you're comfortable with. But if you use that same structure for, let's say, for example, it's task 1, if you use the same structure for every single category, you know, that's not okay. So it's having a variety of structures and using them in the correct way is more the goal. Avoiding simple sentences, and don't worry too much about the number of complex structures that you're using, because the examiner won't be counting them in that way. Okay, so Crazy Chess World. Hello, teacher. I have a problem with grammatical range of task 1. More often than not, I end up using while A happened, B happened, or A happened, whereas B happened. Do we have other structure? Well, I mean, there's nothing wrong with those unless you're using them in every sentence. So what you want to do is just take a look. Like if you go to my website, you will see, I don't know how many, there's like 20 or 30 sample essays for task 1 on my website. You'll see the different range of structures there, but it's not that you shouldn't use those structures. Those structures are ideal for IELTS writing task 1, but you can't overuse them either. So if you use them maybe like once in the overview, and then maybe once more again in the body paragraphs, and then just move on to other ones. You don't always have to compare, this happened here, whereas that happened there. You know, you can just introduce the categories by putting a full stop and then going, you know, this is what happened to A, full stop. For B, this is what happened. So, you know, you don't always have to interconnect them in that way. And if you're using cohesive devices too much, that would stop you getting a band 8 for coherence and cohesion as well. So, you have to use them in a way where it's suitable, not just pushing them into every sentence. But you're right, like using while and whereas for every sentence would be a problem. But using them in every essay isn't, because, you're only being assessed on one essay at a time. One task, one essay at a time. So, yeah, I'm not sure exactly. I'd have to see your writing to see if you're overusing them, but they're definitely, you wouldn't need to avoid them. Let me share you a link for the task 1 essays that I was talking about. I'll just share that with you in the comments here. Okay, so if you just look at the most recent comment, I've shared that link with you. So click on that and you'll see the range of structures that I'm using there. And, it's not a ridiculously wide range of structures. I'm definitely using while and whereas, as you've suggested. May Jihad, when I check my essay with Grammarly websites, it shows I have 45% accuracy. What should I do? You need to focus on what exactly the main problem you have. And if you go to Grammarly, it actually categorizes your mistakes. So you'll see, it depends where you're using it, but if you go to the Grammarly app, like online, it'll have a big list of all your mistakes, and under each mistake it'll say, this is a preposition mistake, this is an article mistake, this is a subject verb agreement mistake. So it'll tell you the type of mistake you're making. So what you want to do is see which one you're making most often and just focus completely on that. Earlier on, when I was talking to Kent Clark, I outlined the process of improving your grammar, that studying the rules, lots of reading, writing, using Grammarly while you're writing. Grammarly also explains your mistakes, but just focus on that one mistake you've decided to work on, not doing all of them together. And then once you're happy with that, you can bring it into your speaking. Dependent prepositions give me a headache. Dependent prepositions. I think you've caught me off guard now. Dependent prepositions. Let me have a quick look at what that is. Now, these are just collocations. So, that basically what you're saying is you don't know which preposition to use. So this is the same thing as learning how to spell a word. Like, there's one spelling is correct, and you need to learn how to spell it that way. And if you don't spell it that way, you're wrong. And it's the same thing with, I've never heard the term dependent prepositions anymore, but it's the same thing. So, if I say I'm looking the sky, what's the missing preposition? Well, most of you would probably know it's at. But how do you know it's at? It's from exposure. You've seen that collocation, or you've heard or read that collocation so many times in the past that you know which one is the correct one, and all of the other prepositions would be wrong. So you have no choice but to learn each one at a time. Look at versus look for, completely different. I had a student the other day said, my mom cooks my family. So if that student had learned the phrase cook for someone, then they would have used that correctly. But the thing is, if you just learn the word cook and you don't learn what preposition to use, well, then you have to guess. So if you study vocabulary without learning the collocation, without learning the dependent preposition, when it comes time to use it, you have to guess because you didn't learn it. You don't know. So really, the main thing to do is when you are learning vocab, make sure that you always include those prepositions as part of what you learn. Learn them as a complete unit, as a complete, chunk of language. And when you learn them that way, you will use them correctly. Whereas if you don't learn them that way, you have to guess. The other thing then, though, is, you've been studying English for years and years, and you've never learned them in that way before. So the problem now is, how are you going to fix that issue? Where you kind of have to go back in time and relearn all the words you didn't learn previously. Grammarly is a great app for that. Like, Grammarly is really good at telling you when your preposition is wrong, or what preposition you should use, or if there's a missing preposition. So have like a notebook or a document where you record all of those issues, where anytime you make a mistake like that, record it in your notebook, and then you can go back and learn it later. But it's compiling all the ones that you have incorrectly learned, or you haven't learned. So, you might know the word cook already, but you don't know you have to use cook for. So if you've made that mistake, write down the correct one, go back and learn it later. So it's about, moving forward, studying vocab in that way. And then for the vocab you've already learned, trying to compile which ones you're using incorrectly, and going back and learning them again. Jihad, hello teacher, I'm trying to ameliorate my grammatical range, but every time I made mistakes. So what you said earlier on is that you have 45% accuracy. So you're making mistakes in many, many areas, just one at a time. Focus on the main one. Don't worry about any other mistakes until you've improved that. Then you move on to the next one. So don't try to do too much at once. It's too challenging to do them all together. English with Shadi. Hello, welcome. Oftentimes my complex sentences are mistaken. So you're probably getting ahead of yourself if you're focusing on complex structures already. Focus on the more basic stuff first. So, build on the foundation, get the easy stuff right first, and then start building up on that. So try not to get ahead of yourself too much there. In my last IELTS test, I got 5.5 in the reading section. How can I improve to from 5.5 to 7 in writing? Well, it's likely grammar might be an issue, but it will be other areas as well. A big part of it is going to be finding out what your mistakes are. Like I was just talking to Stephen, who's on my course earlier on. So when Stephen came to me first, he didn't know what mistakes he was making. So he knew what his overall score was, and he knew it wasn't good enough. But now that I'm giving him feedback, he's able to see, oh, okay, that's what I'm doing wrong. That's what I need to fix. And like Stephen's scores are improving steadily. And now he's working hard as well. Like, it's not just I show you your mistake and instantly you're better. But once you know what your mistakes are, you're able to start fixing them. And that's a big part of it. XIX, good to see you here. Welcome. Kent Clark, I also find it hard at times to understand some structures. It's like matching them into real life context for reference seems to require us understanding how native speakers picture the situation. I can't imagine how that would be the case. But like, grammar definitely does depict how someone sees a situation. I had a student yesterday, we were talking about first and second conditional. And what she was saying is that when you use second conditional, you're imagining what the future will be like. So it's in your imagination. So let's say if we're talking about the second conditional, if I won $1 million, I would do something. Okay. So I'm using I would because I don't expect it to happen. But if somebody else says, oh, I'm buying a lottery ticket. When I win the lottery, I'll buy a new car. It's like, you're kind of looking at that person going like, you seem a little bit crazy. You think you're going to win. Like, of course, everyone wants to win. That's why people play the lottery. But nobody really expects to win. So if you're talking about it as in, I'm confident I'm going to win, your perspective is like, you seem to be outside of what people, outside of reality. So yeah, what you're saying about how a speaker pictures the situation, well, if you're being realistic and I'm probably not going to win, I'm going to use second conditional. But if you are being unrealistic and you've convinced yourself you are going to win, you're going to use first conditional. But people are going to think you're a bit weird because you're using first conditional where most people would use second conditional. So there is an element of that as well. But what you're saying, that you don't understand it because of what the person is thinking, it wouldn't be like that. It's the grammar would reveal to you what the person is thinking, rather than you need to know what the person is thinking before you can understand the grammar. It doesn't work that way around. So it's more likely a misunderstanding you have of the structure or whatever. So again, that's go back to the rules, study the rules, and move forward from there. Hala, hi to you. Jihad, I really need some advice from you. I always end up getting 5.5 in the writing section. Okay, so we were talking about that already. Jamshid, hi sir, which one is critical in writing? Using wide range of grammar structure or making some mistakes, or using limited grammar structures without making any silly mistakes? Unfortunately, you can't go too far on either side. So I usually describe this as like, you imagine a weighing scales, like, one goes up, one goes down. So like the best grammar score you're going to get is where it's sitting in the middle. So you've got, too much range, then your accuracy goes down, you get a low score. Too accurate, well, then your range goes down and you get a low score. So you kind of need to find that balance in the middle where you're using a good range, you are making some mistakes, that's okay, but not making too many mistakes, because then your score is going down. So finding that balance. One of the most important things as well is when you're writing, don't get too caught up in thinking about grammar in that, like, I need more structures, I need to use a wider range of structures. Like, use what you know will communicate clearly as well. Because if you give too much emphasis on wide range, you start making mistakes that cause confusion for the reader. And those are the types of mistakes that are going to get you a band 5 for grammar. So yeah, it's okay to make some small mistakes, but make sure none of those mistakes are causing confusion, because you're going to go straight down once you start entering that kind of territory. Ken Clark, yeah, I meant becoming more natural there. It just feels like sometimes I don't use the structures that are more natural for some ideas. This usually occurs under time constraint or pressure. Yeah, but we're all the same. I've probably made many grammar mistakes while I'm speaking today. It's much more natural to make grammar mistakes while you're speaking, which is why, for a band 9, you can make slips. You can actually make grammar mistakes during your speaking test and get a band 9, because we know that naturally as people speak, they kind of slip up, because you're presenting the information at the same time you're thinking about it. So there isn't enough time to process everything and get everything right. But that's natural. What you're describing happens to everyone. So when it comes to speaking, which is better, video call or face-to-face while taking the test? No difference, unless you feel differently. I mean, the way your test will be scored, the questions you're asked, what the examiner is looking for, nothing else changes. But would you be more comfortable talking to a video, to a person on a video call, or talking to a person face-to-face? Like, if that changes your how you feel, if that changes your you're emotionally, you would be more relaxed one way or the other. I mean, that would be the only difference. So that would be down to you personally, really. No bother, Stephen. Very welcome. Are you on italki, teacher? I mean, can we book a lesson on that website? No, I've never even heard of italki. I have my own website. So yeah, if you want lessons, you can just send me an email there, lara@completetestsuccess.com. But no, not on italki. Do you use Telegram? If so, do you mind organizing paid mock speaking tests? Again, I don't have Telegram, but I do have mock speaking tests. So what I have is essay corrections, speaking tests, writing course, speaking course. I support students with reading and listening. So basically, I can help you with any part of the IELTS test, but not on Telegram, not on italki. It's all, I have my own website and my own stuff. So yeah, just send me an email and we'll be able to arrange that. Jed, how can I arrange your course? How to get private feedback from you personally? Okay, so let me share the link with you guys. I have, just 1 second, I wasn't ready for this. Okay, so I'll just leave a comment here at the end. So one-on-one corrections, so that's for speaking and writing, and IELTS courses where I cover speaking, writing, reading, and listening. You'll find those in the link there. Or, like I said, just send me an email. We can talk about it. lara@completetestsuccess.com. One thing though, I often turn students away because they don't have realistic goals. So if you send me an email or if you join my waiting list, basically I'm going to ask you some questions and find out what your situation is, because I will have students who will come to me saying, you know, I got a band 5 in my test last week. I have another test next week and I need a 7. It's like, you know, I'm not magic. I can help you. I can show you what your mistakes are, but you need time to improve. So just because I show you your mistake doesn't mean that you're instantly after improving. Like I was just saying with Stephen, like Stephen works really, really hard, which is why when I show him his mistakes and he works on them, his scores improve. So what is important, it's not a problem if you want to go from a band 5 to a band 7, that's not an issue. But do you have enough time to do that? We can't do that in a week. So it just depends how realistic your goals are. And when a student doesn't have a realistic goal, I won't work with them, because, you know, I'm just not happy to take money from somebody when I know already that I can't deliver what they need. So yeah, if you are contacting me, that's how that will work. Go to be pencil. Hi Lara, is grammar simply a box ticking exercise in the writing test? What I mean is, as long as I included all compound, complex structures and tenses, then the exam would give me a grammar max. No, you need to use them correctly. You need to use them in the correct situation. You need to use them accurately. They need to have the correct meaning, and you need to use a range. So that is part of it, but it's not really a box ticking exercise. It's genuinely, do you have a good range of grammar? Do you have good accuracy? And the answer to those two questions determines your score. So it's not as simple as, you know, I'll just use these 6 structures and I'll instantly get a good score. Unfortunately, it's not as easy as that. You know, it has to be, you know, is your real level of grammar at where it needs to be for the score you need, you know? And that's why, like I was saying, if you join my course, I need a realistic amount of time to help you improve, because if your grammar is a 6 and you need a 7, you're going to have to improve your grammar. There's no real kind of trick to avoid it. You know, I can tell you if you need to improve your grammar, I can tell you what areas of grammar you need to improve. I can help you improve it, but you still need time to make those improvements. I got confused in which that in sentences. Any trick to learn where to use which or that? They're interchangeable. They're interchangeable. You can swap one out. Like, that is the house which I grew up in. That is the house that I grew up in. They're interchangeable in a lot of situations. If you can give me a sentence, Sukhpreet, where they're not interchangeable, I can talk to you about that. But right now, when I think about it, I'm only imagining situations where they can be used interchangeably. I'm not saying that they can't, that there aren't situations where they can't, but off the top of my head, I can't think of any. So if you share an example with me, we'll talk about it. Hey, Raj, welcome. All structures accurately. Yes, accuracy, very important as well. They're only, thank you, Ken Clark. You have a good answer for me here. So Sukhpreet, this is what you were talking about. Which and that are only not, so which and that cannot be interchangeable, are not interchangeable in a non-defining relative clause. So I can still imagine, like, his business closed last year. His business, which made lots of money, closed last year. His business that made lots of money. Ooh, you're right. So if we're using which, it's extra information about the thing. But if I say his business that made lots, so that sounds like he has more than one business. Right. So that's the difference. Good. Thank you, Ken Clark. So interchangeable in non-defining are not interchangeable in non-defining relative clauses. So where it is adding information. Good. Thank you. How often should I read and listen practice? 45 left before my exam. Well, as much as you can, but make sure you're checking your mistakes. So make sure you understand why you're getting your answers wrong. So if you do a test and you get 20 questions wrong, analyze those 20 questions and figure out what mistake did you make. And then once you understand the mistakes you're making, you can work on improving them. Lewis. Hey, Lewis. Is it better to spend time reading and finding structure examples or writing our own sentences? I try to do both, but I feel that when I write sentences, they sound a little unnatural. So there are different stages of improving your grammar. So, we're starting with studying the rules, then reading, then writing. So like from reading, you should be able to better understand, like, comparing what you have said, comparing what the text has said with the rules that you have studied. So you're kind of applying the rules to the text you're reading and understanding it more deeply that way. And once you're more comfortable and you're like, yeah, I get it. And when you're reading, you're really clued in. That's when you would move on to writing. So you're going back and forth between those two stages instead of doing one until you're comfortable and then moving to the next one. Tigo, thanks for the clarification. So as long as I have all advanced structures accurately used without mistakes in the essay, then grammar score would be a 9. Yeah. You make it sound simple. It's not that easy, But yes, you're correct. But yeah. The short answer is yes. Okay, guys. So I have one last question. This is going to be the last question for today. There may be too much detail and no overview or no data. Test takers can give their own point of view and some main ideas, although these may lead to any conclusions. I'm not sure what you're talking about here, me Jihad. Is this something I asked you to send me earlier? That advice, too much detail. Are we talking about task 1? No overview, that's a big problem. No data, that's a bigger problem. Test takers can give their own point of view. Not in task 1, you don't include your own point of view. Some main ideas, So are we talking about task 2? There's no overview in task 2. So it seems like whichever one you're talking about, it seems like you're blending task 1 and task 2 together. So there's a little bit of confusion there. Ken Clark has taken over the lesson. What have we here? Neil Armstrong, who has won 5 Tour de France's, is leaving the US. It's also very context dependent, as you need enough info there to make who you are talking about recognizable immediately. Okay. So what are we? I'm sorry, I don't know what we're talking about here. So this is your question about you need to understand where the writer is coming from, but that would be the same with any newspaper that you read. Like if you jump into the middle of a story, if there's been like, some big event in your country and you haven't looked at a newspaper for 3 weeks, you jump into the middle of it and it's like, I don't know what they're talking about, because they don't provide the context. They expect you to already know. So is that what we're talking about? No, that was for the non-defining relative clause. But this isn't which or that. So that this is for who, not which or that. So that's a different one. But thank you for helping. Thank you. Okay, guys. So that's it for this week. I think that grammar lesson went okay. I'll probably do these again. So I'll just include it in the cycle where I go through, writing, speaking, task 1, task 2. So I'll continue through the cycle, and I'll include grammar again next time. I was a bit worried that it would be a bit of a disaster, but I wanted to try it out anyway. But I think it went okay. Right. So that's it for this week. I'll be back with another live stream next week on another topic, but focusing more on the IELTS test. So until then, take care.